Today, I'm going to briefly introduce you to the genre of dystopian fiction. We're going to look at what it is and the different characteristics that define it. So, really briefly, a dystopia is the opposite of Thomas More's idea of a utopia. And in a utopia, we consider that world or society to be pretty much perfect. Ideals that we value, like justice, peace, happiness, freedom, are all present in a utopia, whereas the opposite is true in dystopia. In these futuristic imagined worlds, violence, oppression, injustice, all of these things that we find in our world as undesirable are just so present in them, which makes them honestly really frightening to look at because we're like, what happens? Is that what we're going to look like in the future? And that's really the whole point of it. So authors want to hold up a mirror to our world and the different structures that exist in it. Things like poverty, oppression, and corruption. What happens when they are pushed to the extreme and really magnified? So, how can we learn about them and take action before, the possibility of this extreme does occur? And these are just a few different titles. One thing that I think of when I think of a dystopia is pretty much The Hunger Games and Divergent, or even The Handmaid's Tale and The Giver. And these are just a couple examples. So, a characteristic that really defines dystopians is government control. And this can look like several different things. On one side, it could take place as something like the Hunger Games, where there's an oppressive ruling body that uses force to get its citizens to comply with those in power, like a totalitarianism situation. On the other, it could be like the Purge, where it's just complete anarchy because there is no government, there's no laws or no order. Propaganda and censorship are often used in these kinds of ways to kind of monitor and control what people believe, how they can challenge that world, and what they perceive as the truth. Another trait is just environmental destruction. So the worlds usually take place at a time when the world is just post-apocalyptic aftermath of either like war, like nuclear violence, or just natural disasters, pushed to the extreme. So if climate change continues to be unaddressed, what kind of effect would that have on our world? Could we live in it in the future? Is it going to look anything like what we know? Another trait is technological control. So AI and robots, what happens when they continue to progress? How does that affect our ability to survive? And technology and these kinds of dystopian fictions is used as a way to control people, force them to submit, also to incite fear in them to help make sure that they comply. This can look like constant surveillance. If you're always being watched, you're going to self-regulate your actions and you're less likely to challenge people in power. This could also look like genetic modification. So if people's genes are altered, how does that affect different class structures in power? Okay, another trait is survival. I think of Lord of the Flies like this. So in these situations in dystopias, people have to pretty much fend for themselves and protect themselves against each other, for an example, or protect themselves against those in power that are oppressing them, or protecting themselves against AI or monsters like zombies. Either way, it's terrifying because, their life is always at threat, basically. And then a last trait is the loss of individualism. When the needs of those in power and society as a whole are placed above the individual, what does that look like when they don't have their own identity and they have to conform completely to the extreme, and they're not able to challenge the system at all, because everyone is equal so to the extreme.